Hey guys, and welcome back to Betwixt the Books. I know, shocking. I'm here with an actual review, and it's kind of an arc review. I did get sent an arc from the publisher, Tor Nightfire, I believe, because they are re-releasing this one. Just got re-released on Tuesday. But I'm here to talk about Mapping the Interior by Stephen Graham Jones. Now, Stephen Grant Jones has been getting a lot of acclaim in the last couple of years. I think the first like really breakout book that he had was The Only Good Indians, which I read a couple years ago and really loved. Right now, there's a lot of buzz for his newest release, The Buffalo Hunter Hunter. This one just came out this year, so this one's getting re-released the same year that this one's coming out. So kind of banking on hopefully the popularity of this one to pull in some more readers for this and some of his other backlist books. But this one is a teeny tiny little novella. It's just over 100 pages. And I guess it would classify as a ghost story, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. If you're wondering, because I have the old physical paperback, the new version does have a different cover. So if you're looking for it in store, it's going to look like this newer one, this like gray, pink, red feather cover, and not this older one. I don't know how I feel. I feel like the newer one is easier to understand what you're looking at. But this older one I feel like is more evocative of the themes of the novella versus just like, I don't know, a ghost. I guess like it's a house, right? It's a haunted house, so like a ghost story type thing with a new cover. But that's not really what the book is about, so I don't know. But if you're looking for it, it probably is going to look like this new version and not the one that I have. If you haven't heard about this book before, outside of me just saying that it was a ghost story, more or less it's a novella following a young boy named Junior who's 12 years old as he realizes one night that thinks he sees his father dressed in full fancy dance regalia moving through the house after he wakes up from sleepwalking one night. He goes on to try and help manifest this version of his dead father to come back because he thinks that he's here to help his brother, who has recently started suffering from seizures. He has always had what sounds like a learning disability, but again, this is from the point of view of a 12-year-old, so you're kind of piecing together certain things as the story goes along. His mom is working all the time, his brother is getting bullied because of his special needs. And you have Junior trying to cope with all of this stuff that's going on and also this haunting that is happening at the same time. That's sort of the gist of the book. Overall, my thoughts, spoiler free. I think I gave it 4 stars when I finished it. I might end up upping that star rating because I think the longer I've sat with it and thought about it, the more that I like it and have enjoyed it. I also have spent some time looking at reviews posted by Indigenous folk. I'm going to link down below one here on BookTube by Native Lady Book Warrior. She did a really good job. She did both a review and a like spoiler-full discussion of the book. And while she's Hopi and Stephen Graham Jones is Blackfoot, um, the there's certain things that, especially in this book, I feel like are catered to and will be more impactful for someone who is Indigenous reading this book versus someone like me who is white. When I was talking with Gretchen a bit about my general anxieties about reviewing this book, part of it was that I felt like I'm not the target audience, but that there are layers to this book that I just cannot access because I am white, which for some people would be problematic, and they might come at this book and say, oh, well, you know, it should be able to be read by everyone. And it definitely can be read by everyone. I don't want somebody to get the idea that you would pick up this book and not understand what's going on in the story. But the more that you read it, and especially after you think about it, this book has so many layers. And I feel like as many layers as I was able to access, there is even deeper layers that I can't. And I think, honestly, that's the sign of a really great book and not the sign of a bad book or a poorly written book. So just be aware of that like you may finish it and be like, I feel like I'm missing something. And if you do, then maybe do what I did and seek out Native voices talking about this book, because they might be able to help clue you in on the aspects that weren't quite clicking together for you. One of the things that's interesting about this book, and part of it is because it's from the perspective of a 12-year-old, and children are generally just naturally going to be unreliable narrators. They tend to like jump to conclusions, and the first thing they think of tends to be the one that they latch onto, and that's what it is. But you don't know whether this is an actual haunting or an allegorical haunting that was being overlaid onto these very traumatic memories that this child had. By the end of the book, you find out that you're being told this story by adult Junior as he is about to do something else. I don't want to spoil it. But it calls into question whether there actually ever was a real haunting, or if it was just his way of coping with the events that were happening at the time. For that reason, while I was reading it, it really reminded me of A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness, which seems weird because that is a YA book, and this is very much an adult horror book. But the way that monsters and monstrousness, speaking to or being around a young child trying to cope with grief, in this case, it's the grief of the death of his father and growing up without a father. In that case, it was the cancer that the child was viewing and their mother soon to be dying. But in either case, these monsters show up and sort of change forms, whether they're scary or hopeful or whatever it is. There is this thing that they have to live with and figure out what to do with. In this case, Junior decides that he needs to kill this manifestation of his father, which I think in a lot of ways also is representative and an allegory for the way that we kill this fantastic view of our parents that we have as children. He's growing to a point where he's now realizing that his dad isn't the perfect view of what a Native American is. He had this view of his dad as a fancy dancer, which is sort of the like bright parts of his culture and his heritage. But as he learns more about his father and as he grows older, and perhaps people are giving him more information than he had when he was very young, he's starting to see the negative aspects that his father had, and comes to the conclusion that his father isn't an altruistic thing here to come back and help him and his family, but is actually something very selfish and very hungry to consume anything that he can, to gain anything that he can out of what is going on. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, whether you have a bad relationship or no relationship with a parent, or you have a good one. Coming to realize that your parents are not perfect beings, and actually do have negative traits, is something that a lot of people struggle with. Obviously, there are a lot of themes throughout this book about identity and heritage. He talks in the beginning briefly, like I said, about how a lot of Indigenous folks want to be that like spiritual warrior, and they do that through ceremonial stuff, like through powwows, doing the fancy dance, because it's kind of the most positive aspects of their culture and their heritage that has been able to be maintained over the years. It was also the view that they have of themselves on TV, because the representation that they had growing up was through old cowboys and Indians movies, which again, not the best representation of the culture. And I have wanted to for a long time do videos where I talk about the representation of redheads in media when I was growing up, because I had the exact same thing of seeing only one archetype of maybe two of what a redhead character can be, and you sort of graft those cultural visions onto your own self-identity. And I think that's part of what's going on here for this 12-year-old boy, is deconstructing or trying to reconstruct what actually he wants to be outside of it. And in the end, it goes back to a line in the beginning where he says his name for the first time, and he says, I'm Junior, so I'm my father's son. And you get this element of generational trauma or generational cycles where he is sort of turning into his father, and even his own son has aspects of the exact same thing that has happened to his father. So there is this endless cycle that you're trapped in, and this haunting that never quite goes away, even when the actual manifestation of the haunting is gone and done with. Stephen Graham Jones, in general, I would say, for most of the time, is writing what I would consider literary horror, where there are folks who write horror for the spectacle of it, where you're getting as much gore and trauma and whatever's going on. And there's definitely a good amount of gore in this book. Trigger warning if you have issues with violence against animals, because there are elements of some violent dogs who meet a violent end themselves. So there is definitely like a lot of horrific imagery in this one. It's a horror book still, but the themes of the book are much more literary based. It's much more internal, much more inward looking than you would necessarily see in like maybe like a splatterpunk gross out horror book. It's less for entertaining and more thought provoking, which a lot of horror actually is. If you aren't a horror reader, this might be something to pick up, especially because of how short it is. And I would recommend it for folks who are looking for something Indigenous to try. If you haven't picked up a book by an Indigenous author ever, Stephen Graham Jones has a really great voice. I think they're releasing an audiobook with this re-release, so you might be able to get and sort of hear the cadence and sentence structure, because it to me, you can hear the cultural intonation in his writing. There's a specific rhythm that I think a lot of Indigenous folks have that kind of keys you in, especially in their storytelling. And you can hear it when you're reading books by Stephen Graham Jones. So again, while I feel like there are elements of this book that even I can't access, it's definitely one that I think warrants a read. I went back and read certain sections over and like highlighted bits because they were more poignant and impactful after having finished the book than they were when I had initially read them. And I think that's also a sign of a really good book, when you want to go back and see where like seeds were planted for the ending or for the themes that you didn't even know were important until you got to the end of the book versus just reading the beginning of it. I'm currently reading Buffalo Hunter Hunter. I will most likely do a review of that as well. But I wanted to talk about this one, especially because I was sent that arc through Edelweiss by the publisher. I didn't even request it. They just were like, hey, you were a fan of Stephen Graham Jones in the past. Would you talk about this one because it's coming out? And I was like, yes, I can. So here I am talking about it. And again, I do recommend it. It's one that I've had on my shelves and I just haven't picked up because I love a novella. And I'm glad that I had a reason to pick it up sooner rather than later. If you've read this one, let me know. If you've read other Stephen Graham Jones and have recommendations for me, I've read The Only Good Indians, and obviously I'm currently reading Buffalo Hunter Hunter. I know he just released a trilogy that's like a slasher collection, and that there's also one that he wrote about Final Girls that is quite popular. But if you've read anything, let me know your thoughts down below. If you want to pick up that audiobook of this one and listen to it instead of read it, I have a link in the description for Libro FM so that you can support indie bookstores instead of supporting Jeff Bezos. And especially after last weekend, when he kind of stomped all over Independent Bookstore Day by putting a big sale on ebooks and books on the same time when we were supposed to be celebrating and supporting our independent bookshops. I think it's worth buying through there or through bookshop.org instead of through Amazon, even if it may cost a little bit more money. Gretchen's been super busy. I've been struggling with my mental health, and when that happens, it makes it hard for me to A, read, and B, sit in front of a camera and look at myself, and then also listen to myself talk on this for hours while I edit it. But hopefully this is coming out to you, and if it is, then I've eaten it for once. But I'm going to try and come back and do some reviews, because somebody should be doing reviews. And Gretchen has been carrying that burden for so many years. So I'm here. I'm going to talk about stuff. It might be a lot of horror because that's where I'm at. And I know a bunch of you have subscribed for Gretchen's romance stuff, but she'll be back when she's not drowning in work again. Hopefully I'm here with something else next week, but if not, I will see you soon with a new reading roundtable with Gretchen towards the end of the month. I hope you guys are having a good week and lovely lives, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.